The gunshot that killed Rebecca's father echoed through the canyon like a promise of more violence to come. And for Ryan Ingram, standing over the body of the outlaw he just shot, it was confirmation that his father had been right all along. Words were cheap, and action was the only currency that mattered in this God-forsaken territory. It was August of 1878, and the Montana sun beat down mercilessly on Eureka, a town that had sprung up near the Canadian border with more hope than sense. Ryan had tracked the outlaw for 3 weeks through treacherous terrain, driven by a bounty that would keep his ranch afloat through the winter. The man had been wanted for robbery and murder, and Ryan had done what needed doing. But as he searched the outlaw's belongings for proof of identity to claim his reward, he found something unexpected. A letter addressed to Grace Donovan, care of the Eureka General Store. Ryan rode into town 2 days later, dust-covered and weary, the letter tucked in his saddlebag alongside the wanted poster. Eureka wasn't much to look at, just a main street with a handful of buildings struggling against the wind that came down from the mountains. The general store stood on the corner, its paint peeling but its windows clean. Ryan tied his horse to the post and walked inside, his spurs jangling against the wooden floor. The woman behind the counter looked up from her ledger, and Ryan found himself momentarily forgetting why he'd come. She had auburn hair pulled back in a practical bun, though strands had escaped to frame a face that was more handsome than pretty, with strong features and eyes the color of sage. She wore a simple calico dress with an apron tied at her waist, and there was ink on her fingers. "Can I help you?" Her voice was steady, businesslike. Ryan pulled off his hat. "Looking for Grace Donovan. You found her." She set down her pen and studied him with frank assessment. "You're Ryan Ingram. You brought in the Hendricks boys last month, news travels. In a town this size, everything travels." She came around the counter, and he noticed she was tall for a woman, maybe 5'7". "What brings a bounty hunter to my store? I pay my bills on time." Ryan reached into his coat and pulled out the letter. "Found this among a dead man's things. Frank Donovan. He was wanted for killing a rancher down in Wyoming." The color drained from Grace's face, but she didn't waver. She took the letter with steady hands, looked at the familiar handwriting on the envelope, and set it on the counter without opening it. "My father. I'm sorry for your loss." "Don't be." Her voice was flat. "He stopped being my father the day he rode out of here 5 years ago and left my mother and me with nothing but debts and shame. She died 2 winters ago trying to keep this store running." Ryan shifted his weight, uncomfortable with the raw honesty. In his experience, people either broke down or lied when confronted with hard truths. Grace Donovan did neither. "The letter might have something important in it." "I doubt it. My father was good at promises and bad at keeping them." She pushed the letter back across the counter. "But thank you for bringing it. Most men wouldn't have bothered." "Most men aren't decent." "No," she agreed. "They're not." Ryan found himself lingering, searching for a reason to stay. "You run this place alone. I have a boy who helps with heavy lifting and misses. Chen comes in 3 days a week, but yes, mostly alone." She tilted her head. "Why? Seems like a lot of work for one person." "Work doesn't scare me, Mr. Ingram. It's the one thing that's never let me down." She moved back behind her counter, a clear dismissal. "Was there anything else?" Ryan put his hat back on. "No, madam. I'll be on my way." But as he walked out into the bright afternoon, he found himself thinking about Grace Donovan's steady hands and steadier voice. In a world where everyone wanted something from him, her indifference was strangely compelling. 3 days later, Ryan rode back into town with a legitimate reason. He needed supplies. His ranch, such as it was, sat 10 miles outside Eureka, a struggling operation he'd inherited from his uncle. Most of his money came from bounty hunting, but he kept the ranch going out of stubbornness more than sense. His father had taught him that a man proved his worth through deeds, not words, and walking away from a challenge would prove him a quitter. Grace was measuring out flour for an elderly woman when he entered. She glanced up, registered his presence with a slight nod, and continued with her customer. Ryan browsed the shelves, listening to her patient explanation of prices and the promise that more sugar would arrive on the next freight wagon. When the old woman left, Grace turned to him. "Mr. Ingram, back so soon? Need supplies. And you can call me Ryan." "I'll call you Mr. Ingram until I know you better." But there was the faintest hint of amusement in her eyes. "What do you need?" He rattled off his list, and she moved efficiently through the store, gathering items. Her movements were economical, practiced. She knew where everything was without looking. "You've been running this store a while," he observed, "since I was 16. My mother needed help and I was what she had." Grace set a sack of coffee beans on the counter. "Anything else? Why'd you stay? After she died, I mean." "Could have sold the place, moved somewhere easier." She paused, her hand resting on a bolt of fabric. "This store is the only thing my mother left me that mattered. She poured her heart into it after my father left. Every dollar earned, every customer served, every debt paid off. It would dishonor her memory to walk away just because it's hard. That's loyalty. That's love, Mr. Ingram, though I suppose they're the same thing." She tallied his purchases. $4.30. Ryan paid, struck by her words. His own father had never spoken of love. Jonathan Ingram had been a hard man who believed affection was demonstrated through provision and protection, not soft words or gentle gestures. When Ryan's mother died of fever when he was 12, his father had doubled down on that philosophy, teaching his son to be strong, capable, and self-reliant. "Love requires proof," his father had said. "Any fool can say the words. A real man shows it through his actions, his sacrifices, his willingness to do what needs doing." Ryan had carried that belief into adulthood, measuring every relationship by concrete standards. It was why he'd never married, why he kept people at arm's length. No one had ever proven their affection to his satisfaction, and he'd proven his to no one. As he gathered his supplies, Grace said, "I read the letter. After you left." He looked up. "My father said he was sorry, that he'd made money in a silver strike and was coming back to make things right." Her laugh was bitter. "Except he made that money by robbing a rancher and killing him, so even his apology was built on blood and lies." "I'm sorry," Ryan said and meant it. "Don't be. I learned a long time ago that words are just air. It's what people do that matters." She met his eyes. "That's why I thanked you for bringing the letter. You didn't have to. You did anyway. That says something about who you are." Ryan left the store feeling oddly unsettled. Grace Donovan's philosophy mirrored his father's, yet somehow it sounded different coming from her. Less like a wall against the world and more like a foundation to build on. Over the following weeks, Ryan found reasons to come to town more often than strictly necessary. He told himself it was practical. Grace's store had fair prices and good stock. But the truth, which he barely admitted to himself, was that he wanted to see her. She treated him exactly as she treated everyone else, with polite efficiency and no particular warmth. Yet she was never cold, never dismissive. She was simply steady like bedrock. He learned things about her in fragments. She kept the store open 6 days a week, closing only on Sundays for church. She extended credit to families who needed it, but kept careful records and expected payment when promised. She'd learned to shoot after her mother died, keeping a rifle under the counter. She read books whenever business was slow, mostly practical volumes about agriculture and commerce, but also the occasional novel. Don't you get lonely? Ryan asked one afternoon in September when he'd stopped by for tobacco. Grace considered the question seriously. Sometimes, but lonely is better than bound to someone unreliable. I watched my mother wait for my father to change, to come back, to be the man he promised he'd be. That kind of hoping will kill you slower than any disease. So you've given up on marriage. I didn't say that. I said I won't settle for promises. If a man wants me, he'll prove it through his constancy, not his words. She wrapped the tobacco in brown paper. What about you? No wife at that ranch of yours. Never found anyone worth proving myself to. Or maybe you never let anyone close enough to try. She handed him the package. 30 cents. Her observation stung because it was accurate. Ryan paid and left, troubled by how easily she read him. That night, lying in his bunk at the ranch, Ryan thought about proof and constancy. His father had taught him that love was demonstrated through grand gestures, through sacrifices and dramatic actions. But Grace seemed to believe it was proven through steady presence, through showing up day after day regardless of circumstances. He wasn't sure which philosophy was right or if either was. The next Sunday, Ryan did something unprecedented. He went to church. Eureka's small white chapel sat at the edge of town, presided over by an aging circuit preacher who visited twice a month. Ryan hadn't attended since his uncle's funeral 2 years ago, but he found himself drawn there, telling himself it was about respecting the community, not about seeing Grace. She sat 3 rows from the front, her hair neatly pinned, wearing a dark blue dress that brought out the color of her eyes. She didn't look back when he entered late and took a seat in the rear, but Mrs. Chen, sitting beside Grace, definitely noticed and whispered something that made Grace's shoulders stiffen slightly. After the service, Grace came to him as people milled about outside in the sunshine. "Mr. Ingram, this is a surprise. Figured it was time I showed my face. Mm." She studied him with those sage green eyes. "Mrs. Chen thinks you're courting me. What do you think?" "I think you're trying to figure something out, and I happen to be part of the equation." She pulled on her gloves, practical cotton ones. "I also think you're lonely, same as me, but too stubborn to admit it. You always this direct, always. Life's too short for dancing around the truth." She nodded toward the street. "Walk me back to my place." Grace lived in a small house behind the store, a tidy structure her mother had bought with the first profits after her father left. Ryan walked her there, acutely aware of the curious glances from townspeople. In a community this size, such things were noted and discussed. "You'll have people talking," he said. "Let them talk. I stopped caring what people thought when my father became an outlaw and my mother died of exhaustion trying to restore our name." She paused at her gate. "But you should know, Mr. Ingram, that if you're coming around just for companionship or convenience, you should stop now. I meant what I said about proof and constancy." "What would constitute proof for you?" Grace looked at him for a long moment. "That's not something I can define in advance. But I'll know it when I see it. Or rather, when I don't see it, because real constancy is about what you do when no one's watching, when there's no reward, when it's just you deciding who you want to be. That's a hard standard. I'm worth a hard standard, Mr. Ingram. And if you don't think so, that's fine. But don't waste my time finding out." She went inside, leaving Ryan at the gate feeling like he'd just been challenged to something he wasn't sure he could achieve. October brought cold winds down from the mountains and the first threat of snow. Ryan's ranch demanded more attention as he prepared for winter, but he still found himself riding into town regularly. He bought supplies from Grace, exchanged brief conversations, and left. Nothing dramatic, nothing that would constitute courting by any traditional measure, but he showed up. Consistently. One afternoon, he arrived to find Grace struggling with a heavy crate that had been delivered while her young helper was out sick. Without asking, Ryan lifted it and carried it where she directed. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "I know. Thank you. You're welcome." That was all. But the next week, when he came in and she was overwhelmed with customers, he stayed and helped carry purchases out to wagons, not asking permission, just doing what was needed. Grace didn't thank him that time, but when everyone had left and the store was quiet, she poured 2 cups of coffee from the pot she kept in the back and handed him one. "You're persistent," she said. "So are you. About different things." "Maybe." Ryan sipped the coffee strong and hot. "Or maybe we're persistent about the same thing and just coming at it from different directions." Grace leaned against the counter. "What do you think we're both persistent about? Finding something real in a world full of pretense." She smiled, a real smile that transformed her face from handsome to beautiful. "You might be smarter than you look, Mr. Ingram. You might be softer than you act, Miss Donovan. Don't count on it." But there was warmth in her voice that hadn't been there before, and when Ryan left that evening, he felt like he'd crossed some invisible threshold. The first snow came in early November, a light dusting that made the landscape look clean and new. Ryan was checking his cattle when one of his fence posts broke, weakened by rot. He spent the afternoon repairing it, cold and dirty work that left his hands raw. By the time he finished, it was late, but instead of heading home, he found himself riding toward town. Grace was closing the store when he arrived. She looked up in surprise as he dismounted. "Little late for shopping," she said. "Wasn't shopping." Ryan tied his horse. "Thought you might need help carrying your ledgers home. I've been carrying my own ledgers for years." "I know." "But you don't have to tonight." Something shifted in her expression. "You have fence post splinters in your hands. I'll live. Come inside." Grace lit a lamp and brought out her medical supplies, the same kit she kept for customers who had accidents in the store. She made Ryan sit while she pulled splinters from his palms with tweezers, her touch gentle but efficient. "Why are you really here?" she asked, not looking up from her work. "Because I wanted to be." "That's not proof of anything except impulse." "Then what would be proof?" Grace finally looked at him. "Coming back tomorrow and the next day and the day after that, not because you need something or want something, but because showing up is who you are. And if I did that, then maybe I'd start believing you're serious." "I am serious." "Words, Mr. Ingram." But her hands were still gentle on his. Ryan made a decision then, one that went against every lesson his father had taught him about keeping his feelings private until proven. "My father told me that love requires grand gestures, that you prove your worth through sacrifices and big actions. But watching you these past months, I think he was only half right. The big actions matter, but so do the small ones. So does showing up every day, being steady, being reliable. You live that. You are that. And I want to learn how to be that too." Grace set down the tweezers. "Why?" "Because I'm tired of being alone. Because you're the most honest person I've ever met. Because when I'm in town and don't stop by your store, the whole day feels incomplete." He took a breath. "Because I think I'm falling in love with you and I don't know what to do about it except keep showing up." "That's a lot of words, Mr. Ingram." "Ryan. And yes, they are, but I'll back them up with actions if you'll let me." Grace was quiet for a long moment, her hand still resting on his. Finally, she said, "I'm not going to make this easy. I don't want easy, I want real. Then come back tomorrow. We'll see where it goes from there." Ryan came back the next day, and the next, and the next. Through November's deepening cold, he rode into town whenever he could, helping Grace with whatever needed doing. He repaired loose boards in the store's floor, replaced a broken window, helped inventory stock. He didn't make a show of it, didn't announce his intentions to the town. He just did the work and went home. Grace didn't soften quickly. She accepted his help with practical gratitude but maintained her emotional distance. Ryan found it both frustrating and reassuring. If she fell easily, her earlier words about Constancy would have been hollow. Her resistance was proof she meant what she said. "You're still here," she observed one afternoon in late November. "Did you think I wouldn't be? I thought you might get tired of proving yourself." "Is that what I'm doing, isn't it?" Grace looked up from her account books. "You want me to believe you're constant, so you're being constant. But what happens when you've won? When I say yes to courting or engagement or marriage, do you go back to being who you were before?" Ryan set down the hammer he'd been using to fix a shelf. "Do you think that's how it works? That constancy is a performance you drop once you've got what you want. I've seen it happen. With your father. With my father. With other men in this town who courted women pretty with promises and treated them plain after the wedding." She closed her ledger. "I'm not saying that's who you are. I'm saying I don't know yet, and neither do you. It's easy to be constant for 3 months. It's harder to be constant for 3 years or 30. So you want me to court you for 3 years before you'll believe me. I want you to understand that what you're offering, if you're really offering it, is a lifetime commitment. Not to grand gestures, but to small daily choices. Choosing to come home instead of the saloon. Choosing to fix the fence instead of putting it off. Choosing to be present even when it's boring or hard or thankless." She met his eyes. "That's what killed my mother. Not my father leaving, but the years before when he was there in body but not in spirit. She had his presence without his constancy, and it hollowed her out." Ryan understood then what Grace was really asking for. Not proof of his feelings, which were easy to demonstrate through passion or drama, but proof of his character, which could only be shown through time and tedium. "Then I'll give you time," he said. "As much as you need. And if I never feel sure, then I'll have spent my time becoming a better man, which isn't wasted either way." Grace smiled, small and cautious. "You really have been thinking about this?" "Hard not to think about it when you're all I think about." December arrived with heavy snow that made travel difficult. Ryan couldn't get into town as often, but he managed once a week, riding through conditions that kept most people home. Grace never commented on the effort it took, but he noticed she always had hot coffee ready and a warm meal waiting. "You don't have to feed me," he said one evening as she set a plate of stew before him. "I know. But you ride 2 hours through snow to help me move crates. Seems only fair." They ate together at the small table in her store's back room, talking about everything and nothing. Grace told him about the books she was reading, her plans to expand the store's inventory in spring. Ryan shared stories about his ranch, the challenges of working land that didn't want to be worked. "Why keep it?" Grace asked. "The ranch, I mean. You make more from bounty hunting." "Because my uncle believed in it, because giving up feels like admitting defeat." Ryan pushed food around his plate. "Same reason you keep this store, I suppose. Maybe, or maybe we're both just stubborn. Is that a bad thing? Depends on what we're being stubborn about." She looked at him across the table. "I should tell you something. Mrs. Chen asked me last week when we're getting married." Ryan nearly choked on his stew. "What did you say?" "That we're not courting, so marriage seems premature." "Are we not courting, are we?" Grace set down her fork. "You've never asked me formally. Never made your intentions clear to anyone but me. For all the town knows, you're just a helpful neighbor. Do you want me to make a public declaration? I want you to be honest about what this is. If you're courting me, court me. If you're just keeping me company, that's fine too, but I should know which." Ryan pushed back from the table and stood. His heart was hammering, but his voice was steady. "Grace Donovan, I'm courting you. Have been since October, though I didn't have the sense to say it plain." My intentions are marriage if you'll have me, but I'm willing to wait as long as you need to be sure. Is that clear enough? Grace stood as well, and for the first time since he'd known her, she looked uncertain. Yes, that's clear. And I'm glad you said it. But my answer is still the same. I need time. I need to see who you are when the courtship isn't new anymore, when the shine wears off and it's just daily life. How much time? I don't know. 6 months, a year. I'll know when I know. Ryan wanted to argue that he'd already proven himself, but he understood her caution. Instead, he nodded. Then I'll wait, but I'm making it public now. The whole town can know I'm courting you. Why? Because you deserve to be courted properly, not in secret like something shameful. And because I'm proud to be the man trying to win your hand. Grace's eyes shimmered, though she didn't cry. That's the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me. It's just the truth. Still nice. Ryan left that night feeling like he'd finally said the right thing. But as he rode home through the snow, he wondered how long he could maintain the steady constancy Grace required. Not because he didn't want to, but because his whole life had been about proving himself through dramatic action, not patient presence. This was a different kind of challenge, one that required changing not just his behavior but his understanding of what love meant. Christmas came, and Ryan gave Grace a practical gift, a new lock for her store, better than the old one. She gave him warm gloves lined with rabbit fur, which she'd sewn herself. I'm not much for fancy needlework, she said as he opened the package, but these should keep your hands from freezing on the ride back and forth. They're perfect. Ryan pulled them on, struck by the intimacy of wearing something she'd made with her own hands. Thank you. They spent Christmas evening together, along with several other townspeople who'd gathered at the store for warmth and company. Ryan sat beside Grace, not touching her but close enough to feel her presence. Several people commented on what a fine couple they made, and Grace didn't contradict them. Later, as he prepared to ride home, she walked him to his horse. The night was clear and cold, stars brilliant overhead. Thank you for staying, she said. Thank you for wanting me here. I do want you here, Ryan. I want you to know that. I'm not making you prove yourself because I doubt you. I'm doing it because I can't afford to make a mistake. I understand. Do you? Do you really understand that I'm terrified? Her voice dropped. That I'm more scared of hoping and being disappointed than I am of staying alone. Ryan took off his glove and touched her face, his thumb brushing her cold cheek. I understand, and I'm staying anyway. Grace leaned into his touch for just a moment before stepping back. Go home before you freeze. See you next week. I'll be here. January and February were brutal months. Snow piled high, temperatures dropped low enough to kill cattle, and Ryan fought to keep his ranch operational. He couldn't get into town for weeks at a stretch, and when he finally made it in late February, he half expected Grace to have given up on him. Instead, she looked up from her counter with relief. I was getting worried. Trail was impassable, finally cleared enough to get through. You look half frozen. I'm all right. But he wasn't really. He was exhausted from fighting the weather, from watching cattle die despite his best efforts, from the grinding loneliness of being snowed in with only his own thoughts for company. Grace must have seen it in his face because she locked the store door and led him to the back room. Sit, she ordered, and brought him coffee and bread with butter. When did you last eat? Yesterday. Eat this. Then you're sleeping in my spare room before you ride home. I can't impose. You can and you will. You're dead on your feet and I'm not sending you back out to freeze. Her tone brooked no argument. Ryan was too tired to protest. He ate, grateful for the food and warmth. Grace's spare room was tiny but clean, with a narrow bed and quilts piled high. He collapsed into it fully clothed except for his boots and was asleep instantly. He woke to pale morning light and the smell of cooking. For a moment, he didn't know where he was, Then memory returned. He found Grace in her kitchen, making breakfast. "You didn't have to do this," he said. "I wanted to. Besides, you needed the rest." She served eggs and bacon. "How bad is it at the ranch? Lost 10 head of cattle. Maybe more I haven't found yet. Barn roof needs repairs from the snow load. I'm burning through my winter supplies faster than expected." Grace listened as he talked, and he found himself telling her more than he'd intended. About his fears that he'd lose the ranch, about the temptation to give up bounty hunting and just focus on the land, or vice versa. About the bone-deep weariness that came from trying to prove himself on all fronts. "You don't have to prove anything to me through the ranch," Grace said when he finished. "I don't care if you keep it or sell it. That's your choice. But I thought you wanted proof of constancy." "I want proof that you can commit to what matters. If the ranch matters to you, then fight for it. If it doesn't, let it go. But don't destroy yourself trying to maintain something just because you think you should." Ryan looked at her across the table. "You're giving me permission to fail." "I'm giving you permission to be human, to make choices based on what's actually important rather than some impossible standard of perfection." She refilled his coffee. "Besides, you've already proven your constancy. You've been showing up for 4 months now in every weather, never asking for anything except the chance to be present. That's more than most men offer in a lifetime." "So you believe me now?" Grace was quiet for a moment. "I'm starting to. But belief is just the beginning. The real question is whether I have the courage to act on it. What's stopping you? Fear. The same thing that stops most people from taking risks." She met his eyes. "But I'm working on it." Ryan spent the day in town, helping Grace with various tasks around the store. It felt wonderfully normal, almost domestic. They worked in comfortable silence, speaking only when necessary. Several customers commented on what a good team they made, and Ryan had to agree. That evening, before he left, Grace stopped him at the door. "I've been thinking about what you said at Christmas, about making your intentions public. Yes, I think we should be seen together more. Not just you helping at the store, but actually courting. Dinners, church, social events, so people know we're serious." "I thought you didn't care what people thought." "I don't care what they think of me, but I care what they think of us of this, because if we're going to do this properly, we should do it in the open." She took a breath. "Also, I'd like to see your ranch, to understand that part of your life." "It's not much to see right now. I don't care if it's perfect. I want to see where you live, how you live." Grace looked almost shy. "If that's all right." "More than all right. Come Sunday, I'll cook you dinner." "You cook?" Passively. "Don't expect anything fancy." Grace smiled. "I don't expect fancy, Ryan. I never have." Sunday arrived clear and cold. Ryan spent Saturday cleaning his small ranch house, which consisted of 3 rooms and a loft. It wasn't much, but it was solid, built by his uncle with care. He cooked a simple meal of roasted chicken and vegetables, trying not to burn anything. Grace arrived in the afternoon, driving herself in a small wagon. Ryan helped her down, intensely aware of her presence in his space. "It's nice," she said, looking around. "Feels solid." "My uncle built it to last." She walked through slowly, taking in the spare furnishings, the books on the shelf, the clean but worn quilts. In the kitchen, she examined the meal he'd prepared. "You weren't lying about cooking passably. It's not fancy. It's perfect." And she meant it. They ate at his small table, talking about everything and nothing. Grace asked about his uncle, and Ryan found himself sharing memories he hadn't thought about in years. How his uncle had taken him in after his father died of a heart attack when Ryan was 19. How the old man had been gruff but kind, teaching him about ranching with patient repetition. "He sounds like a good man," Grace said. "He was better than my father in some ways." "How so?" Ryan considered his words. My father was all about proving yourself through dramatic gestures, grand sacrifices. My uncle was quieter about things. He just showed up every day and did the work, never made a big deal about it, like someone else I know. Grace looked at him across the table. You're more like your uncle than your father. I'm trying to be. After dinner, Ryan showed her the ranch properly. The barn where his remaining cattle sheltered, the chicken coop, the fence lines he was constantly repairing, the view of the mountains from the eastern pasture. I can see why you keep it, Grace said, looking out at the landscape. It's beautiful in a harsh sort of way. That's Montana for you, beautiful and harsh in equal measure, like some people. She glanced at him sidelong. Are you calling me harsh? I'm calling you honest, which can feel harsh when people aren't used to it. They stood there in the cold, and Ryan found himself saying, I could build something real here, with the right partner. The land's good enough and there's room to expand. Are you asking me something? Not yet. But I want you to know that when I do ask, there's a place for you. A real place, not just in my life but in the work of building something that lasts. Grace turned to face him fully. I appreciate you saying that, I do. But Ryan, I need you to understand something. I don't want to be your partner in a project. I want to be your partner in life, which includes whatever work needs doing but isn't defined by it. That's what I meant. Is it? Because it sounded like you were offering me a role in your plan, and that's not the same as building a plan together. Ryan realized she was right. Even now, he was thinking in terms of proving himself through achievement, through having everything ready and perfect before proposing. You're saying you want to be involved in the decisions, not just the results. I'm saying partnership means we decide together what we're building and why. Not you preparing a place for me to step into. That's harder. Yes, but it's real. Grace pulled her shawl tighter against the wind. My mother never had that. My father made all the decisions and she just supported them, even the bad ones, even the decision to abandon us. I won't live that way. I wouldn't ask you to. You might not ask intentionally, but you're used to being alone, to making choices alone. That's a hard habit to break. So is protecting yourself from disappointment, Ryan pointed out. We're both going to have to change. Grace smiled. Fair point. As winter eased into early spring, Ryan and Grace settled into a pattern that felt almost like marriage without the formality. He came to town twice a week, helping with the store and spending evenings at her house. They attended church together, went to community gatherings as a couple, and slowly built a life that included each other. Ryan learned that Grace snored lightly when she fell asleep reading, that she was terrible at making coffee but excellent at baking bread, that she had opinions about everything from politics to poetry and wasn't shy about sharing them. Grace learned that Ryan was methodical to a fault, planning everything 3 steps ahead, that he had a dry sense of humor that emerged when he was comfortable, that he worried more than he admitted about money, about failure, about not being enough. You are enough, she told him one evening in March. You've always been enough. The question was never your worth. It was whether you could see beyond needing to prove it. And can I? You're getting better at it. You still default to doing instead of being, but you're learning. She took his hand. And I'm learning to trust instead of test. Does that mean you're ready? Almost. I want to make it through spring and summer. I want to see us handle planting season, the busy summer months at the store, the day-to-day grind when it's not romantic or exciting. Can you give me that? I'll give you whatever time you need. But Ryan was getting impatient, not with Grace but with himself. He'd been courting her for 6 months now, and while he understood her need for constancy, part of him wanted to push forward. He wanted to make it official, to put a ring on her finger and tell the world she was his. His impatience came to a head in April when a traveling salesman came through town. The man was smooth-talking and handsome, and he spent considerable time at Grace's store, complimenting her business acumen and suggesting ways she could expand. Ryan watched from across the street, fighting irrational jealousy. That evening he confronted Grace about it. That salesman was quite friendly. He's trying to sell me inventory. Of course he was friendly. Seemed like more than business. Grace set down the ledger she'd been working on and looked at him steadily. Are you jealous? Maybe. Good. Shows you care. But then she softened. Ryan, I'm not interested in him or anyone else. I'm committed to this, to us, even if I haven't said yes to marriage yet. You need to trust that. I do trust you. I don't trust other men's intentions. Then you're trusting the wrong thing. Trust that I know what I want and won't be swayed by a smooth talker. She came around the counter. I've been waiting 6 months for you to prove your constancy. Do you think I'm going to throw that away for a man who will be gone next week? No, but it reminded me that we're not officially engaged, that any man could try to win you away. So propose. Ryan blinked. What? If you're ready, propose. I won't say yes yet, but you can ask. That's not how it works. Why not? Who says the proposal and acceptance have to happen simultaneously? Grace smiled. Ask me, Ryan. Put your intentions into words, then I'll give you my answer when I'm ready. Ryan took a breath, realizing this was another test of sorts. Not of his constancy, which he'd proven, but of his willingness to be vulnerable. Grace Donovan, will you marry me? I don't have a ring yet, and I know you want more time, but I need you to know that I'm committed, that I want to build a life with you, whatever that looks like. That I love you, have loved you since I started understanding what love really means, which is about 6 months after I met you. He paused. So yes, will you marry me? Grace's eyes were bright. Thank you for asking. That's not an answer, I know, but I needed to hear the question. She touched his face. I'll answer by summer's end. I promise. It was frustrating, but Ryan respected her timeline. He'd come this far, he could wait a few more months, and in truth, Grace was right. The daily work of loving someone was far more important than the dramatic gestures he'd been raised to value. Spring turned to summer, and the land came alive. Ryan worked his ranch with renewed energy, repairing winter damage and planning improvements. Grace's store flourished as travelers returned to the roads. They saw each other 3 times a week now, sometimes more. In June, Ryan's best horse went lame. It was a significant loss. He needed the animal for both ranch work and the occasional bounty hunting job he still took. Grace, hearing about it, arranged for him to borrow a horse from a friend, refusing repayment. That's what partners do, she said when he protested. They help each other without keeping score. I'm not good at accepting help. I know, but you're learning. She smiled. Same as I'm learning to give it without resentment. You resent helping people. I used to. Every favor felt like someone taking advantage, but with you, it's different. It feels like investing in something that matters. That's how I feel about you, about us. I know. I see it every time you show up, every time you help without being asked, every time you choose to be present instead of absent. Grace took his hand. I'm almost ready, Ryan, I promise. July brought a crisis. The bank threatened to foreclose on a nearby ranch, and several families who depended on that rancher for work faced homelessness. The community rallied to help, and Ryan found himself organizing efforts alongside Grace. They worked 16-hour days, coordinating donations, negotiating with the bank, finding temporary housing. Through it all, Ryan watched Grace navigate conflicts with steady patience. She mediated disputes, cajoled stubborn parties into compromise, and kept meticulous records of every dollar raised and spent. She was magnificent, and Ryan fell in love with her all over again. On the final night, after they'd successfully saved the ranch and everyone's jobs, Grace collapsed into a chair at her store, exhausted. "We did it," she said. "You did it. I just helped." "No, we did it together, and that's how I know." "Know what?" Grace looked at him, and her eyes were clear and certain. "That I want to marry you, that I trust you, that I'm ready to build a life together." Ryan's heart leaped. "You're saying yes." "I'm saying yes, to your proposal, to partnership, to whatever comes next." She stood and came to him. "I've watched you for 9 months now. I've seen you tired, frustrated, angry, scared. I've seen you fail and succeed and keep trying regardless. I've seen you be patient when you wanted to rush, vulnerable when you wanted to be strong. And through all of it, you've been constant. Not perfect, but constant, and that's what I needed to see." Ryan pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "I love you. I've been wanting to say that more often, but I wasn't sure you wanted to hear it. I always wanted to hear it. I just needed to believe it first." Grace pulled back to look at him. "And I love you too. I think I have for a while, but I was too scared to admit it." "What changed?" "I stopped waiting for you to fail and started appreciating that you kept trying. And I realized that constancy isn't about never making mistakes. It's about always coming back, always choosing to stay, always doing the work even when it's hard." They kissed then, a long, sweet kiss that tasted like promises kept and future hopes. When they finally pulled apart, Grace was smiling. "We should probably tell people." "Probably. But can we just enjoy this moment first?" "Yes. Let's just be happy for a minute." They sat together in the quiet store, holding hands, letting the reality sink in. Ryan had proven himself, not through grand gestures but through steady presence. And Grace had proven herself too, not by testing him endlessly, but by having the courage to eventually trust. The announcement of their engagement delighted the town. Mrs. Chen claimed she'd known all along. The preacher offered to perform the ceremony in September. People who'd watched them court with patient interest now smiled knowingly, as if they'd orchestrated the whole thing. Ryan bought a simple gold band at the store in Helena, the closest city. He would have preferred something fancier, but Grace had been clear about preferring practical beauty to ostentatious display. When he slipped it on her finger, she cried for the first time since he'd known her. "I never thought I'd have this," she whispered. "A partner who stays." "You'll always have me," Ryan promised. "Even when you're sick of me. Especially then." They married on a clear September morning in 1879, exactly 1 year after Ryan had first walked into Grace's store with her father's letter. The ceremony was simple, attended by most of Eureka's population. Grace wore a cream-colored dress she'd sewn herself. Ryan wore his best suit, cleaned and pressed. The vows were traditional, but when Ryan said "for better or worse," he meant it with his whole heart. This woman had taught him that love wasn't about proving yourself through dramatic sacrifices, but about choosing daily to be present, engaged, and constant. And when Grace said, "to love and to cherish," she meant it as a promise that she would no longer let fear keep her from fully committing. The reception was held at the store, cleared of merchandise and filled with food and music. People danced and ate and celebrated. Ryan watched his wife, because that's what she was now, his wife, laugh with Mrs. Chen. She looked lighter somehow, as if laying down the burden of fear had freed something essential in her. "Happy?" he asked when he finally got her alone for a moment. "Terrified and happy," Grace admitted. "This is all new territory, for me too, but we'll figure it out together." "Together," Ryan confirmed. They spent their wedding night at Grace's house, which would now be their house until they figured out longer-term arrangements. Ryan had expected awkwardness, but there was only tenderness. Grace had spent a year watching him prove his constancy. Now it was his turn to receive her trust. Afterward, lying in the dark, Grace said, "I used to think I needed to protect myself from disappointment, But protecting yourself from disappointment means protecting yourself from hope too. And hope is what makes life worth living. When did you figure that out? Around month 6 of watching you show up in snowstorms and never once complain about it. She turned to face him. You gave me hope, Ryan. Hope that constancy is real, that love can be proven through dailiness rather than drama. That's the greatest gift you could have given me. You gave me something too. You taught me that real strength isn't about being invulnerable. It's about being honest, even when honesty reveals weakness. We're quite the pair, aren't we? Both so determined to protect ourselves that we almost missed each other. But we didn't miss each other. We found each other. And that's what matters. They fell asleep tangled together, the first of thousands of nights they would share. The early months of marriage required adjustment. Ryan moved most of his belongings into Grace's house, keeping only the ranch's bunkhouse for nights when he needed to stay on the land. They negotiated everything from how to manage finances to who cooked breakfast. I'm terrible at compromise, Grace admitted after a particularly frustrating discussion about whether to expand the store or invest in ranch improvements. So am I. We'll learn together. And they did. Slowly, with many stumbles, they figured out how to make decisions jointly. How to respect each other's autonomy while building shared goals. How to fight fair and reconcile quickly. The town watched their marriage with interest, as small towns do. Some people had bet on how long it would last, convinced that two such strong-willed individuals would clash. But what those people didn't understand was that strength plus strength doesn't always equal conflict. Sometimes it equals partnership. By the following spring, Grace was pregnant. The news terrified and thrilled them both. I don't know how to be a mother, Grace said, hands on her still flat stomach. I don't know how to be a father, but we'll figure it out. You keep saying that, because it keeps being true. Grace's pregnancy was difficult. She was sick constantly in the early months, and the summer heat made her miserable. But Ryan was there through all of it, holding her hair when she vomited, bringing her cool water, running the store when she couldn't get out of bed. This is not glamorous, Grace said one particularly bad morning. No, but it's real. You're still here. Where else would I be? Some men can't handle this part, the messy reality of it. Ryan knelt beside the bed and took her hand. I'm not some men, I'm your husband. This is exactly where I belong. Their son was born in December of 1880, a healthy baby with strong lungs. They named him John after Ryan's uncle. Grace cried when Ryan suggested it. Your uncle would have loved this, she said, holding their newborn. He would have loved you. Parenthood was harder than either anticipated. John was colicky, crying for hours at a stretch. Grace struggled with exhaustion and doubt. Ryan struggled with feeling helpless, unable to fix what couldn't be fixed, only endured. I don't think I'm good at this, Grace said one night after hours of trying to soothe their son. You're good at it. It's just hard. What if I'm not enough? Ryan took John from her arms, giving her a break. You are enough. You've always been enough, and on the days you're not, I'll be enough for both of us. That's not how it works. Sure it is. That's what partnership means. Carrying each other when one of us is too tired to walk. Eventually, John's colic eased, and he became a delightful baby, quick to smile and curious about everything. Ryan discovered he loved fatherhood more than he'd expected. The daily rituals of feeding and changing and playing felt meaningful in ways his previous life never had. You're good at this, Grace observed one afternoon, watching him build a tower of blocks for John to knock down. At playing with blocks, at being present, at being engaged even in the mundane moments. I learned from the best, Grace smiled. We learned from each other. The years passed, marked by seasons and milestones. They had 2 more children, a daughter named Elizabeth in 1882 and another son named Thomas in 1884. The ranch grew modestly successful. Grace's store became a cornerstone of the community. They weren't wealthy, but they were comfortable, and more importantly, they were content. Ryan occasionally took bounty hunting jobs when money was tight, but Grace never complained. She understood that providing was one of the ways he showed love, a remnant of his father's teaching. And Ryan had learned that providing was important, but presence was more so. Their children grew up watching a partnership built on mutual respect and steady constancy. They saw their parents disagree and work through conflicts. They saw their mother run a business and their father manage a ranch. They saw love demonstrated not through grand romantic gestures, but through daily choices to prioritize each other and the family they'd built. One evening in the summer of 1890, Ryan and Grace sat on their porch, watching their children play in the yard. John was nearly 10 now, Elizabeth 8, and Thomas 6. They were playing some complicated game involving cowboys and outlaws, their laughter carrying on the warm air. "We did all right," Grace said, leaning against Ryan's shoulder. "Better than all right. I'm glad I waited, glad I made you prove yourself." "I'm glad you did too, though it was frustrating at the time." Grace turned to look at him. "Do you remember when we met? When you brought me that letter from my father? I remember thinking you were the most self-contained person I'd ever met. I was. I had to be. But you taught me that being self-contained isn't the same as being whole. I needed to let someone in to become complete. And you taught me that love isn't about proving yourself worthy. It's about showing up day after day and choosing to be there even when it's not exciting or dramatic. Your father was wrong, you know, about love requiring proof. He wasn't entirely wrong. Love does require proof. He just had the wrong idea about what constitutes proof." Ryan pulled Grace closer. "The proof isn't in the grand gestures. It's in the constancy. In choosing the same person every day through good and bad, through boring and exciting, through easy and hard. That's what I tried to show you." "You succeeded." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and purple. Inside, dinner waited to be served. Later, there would be baths and bedtime stories and a dozen small tasks. But for now, they simply existed together. Two people who'd learned that love wasn't something you proved once and forgot about. It was something you demonstrated every day through the choice to be constant. "I love you," Grace said. "I love you too." Simple words, but backed by years of action. And that, they both understood, was what made them true. The children grew as children do. John became serious and studious, interested in law. Elizabeth was fierce and independent, learning everything she could about running the store. Thomas was the dreamer, always coming up with elaborate plans and stories. Ryan and Grace adapted to each stage, learning how to parent teenagers with the same patience they'd brought to parenting infants. It wasn't always easy. John went through a rebellious phase where he questioned everything. Elizabeth butted heads with Grace over the store's future. Thomas struggled in school despite his obvious intelligence. Through it all, Ryan and Grace maintained their partnership. They presented a united front to their children while respecting each other's different approaches. They had date nights, even if that just meant walking around the property after the children were asleep. They kept talking, kept negotiating, kept choosing each other. "Marriage is harder than courtship," Grace said one night after a particularly difficult day. "Yes, but it's also better." "How do you figure?" "Because in courtship, you're trying to win someone. In marriage, you've already won, and now you're just living the victory every day. Which means you can be honest about the hard parts instead of pretending everything's perfect." Grace smiled. "When did you get so wise?" "I married a woman who forced me to think deeply about what love actually means." By the mid-1890s, their children were young adults making their own paths. John went east to study law, promising to return to Montana. Elizabeth took over more of the store's operations, implementing new ideas Grace had been too cautious to try. Thomas surprised everyone by becoming an excellent rancher, taking to the work with unexpected passion. "We're getting old," Grace said on her 40th birthday. "We're getting experienced," Ryan corrected. He was 42 now, with silver threading his dark hair. "You ever regret it? Settling down with me instead of continuing as a bounty hunter? You could have had more adventure, more excitement. I had plenty of both. What I didn't have was meaning. You gave me that. This life gave me that." He pulled her close. "I don't regret a single day. Not even the day Thomas put the chickens in the church. All right, maybe that day." Grace laughed, and Ryan marveled that after nearly 15 years of marriage, he still loved making her laugh. The turn of the century found them grandparents. John married a lawyer from Philadelphia and had twin girls. Elizabeth married a merchant and had a son. Thomas remained stubbornly single, claiming he was too busy with the ranch for romance. "He reminds me of you," Grace told Ryan one evening as they watched Thomas work with the cattle. "How so?" "Too focused on doing to remember being." "Should we say something?" "No. He'll figure it out in his own time, like his father did." Ryan and Grace settled into the rhythm of older age with the same constancy they'd brought to everything else. Their bodies were slower, their energy less, but their commitment to each other never wavered. They still talked every evening about their days. They still made decisions together. They still chose each other every day. In 1905, Grace fell ill with pneumonia. For a terrifying week, Ryan sat beside her bed, watching her fight for every breath. The doctor was pessimistic, but Ryan refused to accept that outcome. "You're not leaving me," he told her, holding her hand. "We have too much left to do." Grace, weak and fevered, squeezed his hand. "Always so dramatic." "I learned it from you. I'm not dramatic. You made me court you for a year before saying yes. If that's not dramatic, I don't know what is." Grace smiled, a small flicker of her usual self. "Had to make sure you were serious." "Was I serious enough?" "More than enough. You were perfect." "I wasn't perfect. I'm still not." "Perfect for me then." She recovered slowly but surely, and when she was finally well enough to leave bed, Ryan carried her to the porch so she could see the mountains. "I really thought I might lose you," he admitted. "You won't lose me. I'm too stubborn to die." "Good. Because I don't know how to be without you." Grace looked at him, her eyes serious. "You'd figure it out. You're strong enough. But let's hope you don't have to for a very long time." They had another decade together, precious years marked by grandchildren and quiet contentment. Grace eventually turned the store over to Elizabeth, who ran it with the same steady competence her mother had. Thomas married a neighboring rancher's daughter and had 3 sons in quick succession. John became a judge and returned to Montana, bringing his family with him. "We built something good," Grace said one evening in 1915. They were sitting on their porch watching the sunset as they'd done countless times before. "We did. I'm proud of us, of what we created together." Ryan took her hand, noting how the joints were swollen with arthritis now. "I'm proud of us too, but mostly I'm grateful. Grateful you gave me a chance. Grateful you taught me what love really means." "What does it mean?" "It means showing up, being constant. Choosing the same person every day through everything life throws at you." Grace smiled. "You learned well." "I had a good teacher." Grace died peacefully in her sleep in the spring of 1916, with Ryan beside her. She was 63 years old, and they'd been married for 36 years. The funeral was attended by the entire town and many people from surrounding areas. She'd touched countless lives through her store, her kindness, and her example. Ryan stood at her grave, his children and grandchildren around him, and felt the weight of her absence like a physical thing. But he also felt the strength of everything they'd built together. She taught him that love was proven through constancy, and he'd proven it every day for nearly 4 decades. He lived another 5 years, staying on the ranch Thomas now ran, spending time with his grandchildren and thinking about Grace. He talked to her often, sharing his days as he always had, even though she couldn't answer. But in a way, she did answer, through the lessons she'd taught him, through the life they'd built, through the children and grandchildren who carried their values forward. Ryan died in 1921 at the age of 68. His last words were, "I kept my promise," and his family knew he was talking to Grace, telling her that he'd remained constant until the very end. They buried him beside her, and on the shared headstone their children had inscribed, "They proved love through constancy." The story of Ryan and Grace became part of Eureka's history, passed down through generations. The store Grace founded still operated, run by her great-granddaughter. The ranch Ryan maintained still functioned, worked by Thomas's descendants. But more than the physical legacy, they left behind an understanding of what real love meant. Not the dramatic passion of first attraction, but the steady, daily choice to be present, to be constant, to prove affection not through grand gestures but through unwavering presence. In a Wild West known for its violence and transience, they'd created something lasting. Not through force or flash, but through the quiet power of showing up, day after day, year after year, choosing each other until death parted them. And in the end, that proved to be the greatest adventure of all.